ASMR sports betting video. So if you happen to use the sports betting daily betting platform known as Prizepicks, then a lot of these suggestions I'm about to make will be available for you to bet on this upcoming weekend. So, as we all know, Super Wildcard Weekend is upon us. As I record this, it is Friday afternoon, evening-ish, and tomorrow we will have our first set of playoff games for the 2023-2024 NFL season. So I figured, what better time than now to try and make some money while watching football. Truly, I waited until the playoffs because it's a smaller selection of games, so it's easier to focus on. And yeah, there's no more fantasy football content, so I can do more of these. If you are a user of Prizepicks, or if you are interested in using it, there's actually a way that you can bet or gamble without having to actually lose any money. Prizepicks has a Friday promotion that they do every week called Flex Friday. Basically, Prizepicks offers two different types of betting. There is like a straight bet where you take a bunch of player props and you string them together like a parlay, and if all of them are correct, you get money, but if even one of them is wrong, you don't get anything. A flex play, on the other hand, is still you're stringing together player props, but if one or maybe even two of those doesn't meet the threshold, if it doesn't succeed, then you can still make money or win some of the money you put in back. So you don't have to lose everything. It's not an all or nothing. There's a little bit of flexibility to it, hence that's why it's called a flex play. But the Friday promotion in particular is called Flex Friday because they give you a $20 protected flex play. Not the first, but if you go to the promotions tab on any Friday and you see the Flex Friday promotion, you can click opt in. After hitting opt in, when you go to check out on any flex play bet that you want to place on Friday, there will be a little arrow, a checkbox that you can click that says protect this play, and what that means is up to $20, whatever you bet, if your bet doesn't go your way, you will get refunded that amount in full. So I can put $20 on a 6-pick flex play. If all 6 of those things go my way, I will make $500 because it's a 25 times multiplier for getting 6 out of 6 correct. If I get 5 out of 6, I get $40, and if I get 4 or less, then I just get the full money back. And that's a nice way to bet without actually having to lose any money. So personally, what I would recommend doing is just throwing in $20 into a Prizepicks account and rolling with just that every Friday, because then you get a free shot at trying to win some money every Friday, and if you don't get it, you just try again next week. So now that I've explained why I've filmed this on a Friday and why I think that this is a good opportunity to take advantage of, let's get into the actual picks that I have lined up for this upcoming weekend. I took a look at all of the games that we're going to be having. We have the Browns-Texans game, we have the Dolphins-Chiefs game, we have the Steelers-Bills game, we have the Packers-Cowboys game, we have the Lions-Rams game, and we have the Eagles-Bucks game. So these are the 6 games that are upon us this upcoming weekend. I took a look at all of the different players and who they're matched up against defense-wise, and I found a couple advantageous matchups that I think would be beneficial to bet on. So yeah, no more yapping, I'm just gonna get right into it. So first up, the first player I will recommend to you for this weekend is JoeFlaco. JoeFlaco is the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. He, since taking over for the Browns at quarterback, has been leading the league in passing. Over 5 games this season, JoeFlaco got 216 yards of passing, which averages out to 323 yards per game. And on top of this, he had the most passes of 20 plus, 30 plus, 40 plus, and 50 plus yards in the league in that span. And he led the league in passing attempts. So why is this something to note? Because JoeFlaco gets to go against a Texans defense that ranks number 26 in passing yards allowed this season. Not only that, but they also rank number 26 of 32 in passes over 20 yards allowed, and number 31 in passes over 40 yards allowed. So the Texans defense is vulnerable to the passing game and to the big play game gains down the field, and these are two things that JoeFlaco has excelled at in these last 5 weeks. So Prizepicks has his receiving yards for this upcoming weekend. His line is set at 272.5 yards. Now, as I mentioned before, he is currently averaging 323 yards per game, including a very productive game against the New York Jets, who supposedly have the best secondary in all of football. So if he can dice them up, who can he not throw on? So I would say take the over on JoeFlaco passing yards if you are someone who bets. After that, the next person I want to recommend to you is David Njoku. He is the tight end for the Cleveland Browns. And in games with JoeFlaco this year, David Njoku, his league rankings were number 2 in targets with 45 across 5 games, which averages to 9 a game. He had 30 catches in those 5 games, which averages to 6 a game. He was number 3 in the league in percent of team targets with a 22.5% target share. And he was number 1 in total yardage by a tight end with 390, which averages to 78 a game. He was number 1 in catches of 20, 30, and 40 plus yards of any tight end. So as I mentioned, this passing defense is vulnerable to the longer passes, and David Njoku is very good at hauling those in. Him and JoeFlaco have a good rapport with one another, and I think that they're going to feast on this rather poor Texans defense when it comes to the passing game and specifically covering tight ends. To further that point, the Texans defense this season against opposing tight ends ranks number 28 in receiving yards allowed. It ranks number 30 in receptions allowed, and it ranks number 30 in 20 plus yard catches allowed, and number 29 in 40 plus yard catches allowed. So, vulnerable to tight ends and to just a good passing game. So right now on Prizepicks, David Njoku's lines for this game are set at 57.5 receiving yards, 5.5 catches, and 13 fantasy points. Now, I think these are all good value picks. As I mentioned before, in this 5-game span, he's been averaging 78 yards a game, and he's been averaging 6 catches a game. But there is a bit of fluctuation with his yardage and his catches. It's very borderline. 5.5 and 6 is not a huge difference. So what if he hits the under? That is why I think that fantasy score is actually your best bet in this David Njoku fantasy score. If you take his 2 averages, these 6 catches a game and 78 yards a game, that comes out to 13.8 on average. Right now, his line is only set at 13, and that doesn't even account for touchdowns. If he is to score a touchdown or a 2-point conversion or any big scoring play like that, then that pointage would also come towards his point total. So you get a little bit of a bonus with that, and that's why I think that David Njoku fantasy score is a good play for this weekend. After that, you move into the Dolphins and Chiefs game. Now, this is a game that is going to be played in very, very cold weather. Right now, from what I've seen, it seems like it could be one of the coldest playoff games ever played. Tip-off, I don't know if it will be in the negatives in terms of Fahrenheit, but with wind chill, it is going to feel at least negative 10 degrees in the Kansas City Stadium. So, what does this mean? We know 2 things from this. Number 1, Tua is going to have probably not a great game. The Dolphins have lost all 10 of their last games in which the temperature at kickoff was below 40 degrees, so that doesn't bode well for them. In those 10 games, Tua was the starting quarterback for 4 of them. In those 4 games below 40 degrees, Tua is 0-4 in his career. He has not the best of stats in those games. I believe it's 5 touchdowns in 5. Maybe it was 5 games. Yeah, let's say it was 5. And 5 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. And the biggest drop-off is in his completion percentage. He drops to a 57% completion percentage in cold weather games. Now, this is all very important for us to know heading into this game because it's going to be very cold. The Miami Dolphins are not used to playing in the cold. They have like the hottest climate of any stadium in the NFL, and this is going to be a huge drop-off for them. So likely what we're going to see is we're going to see a Dolphins team that is losing and playing from behind. And when you're playing from behind, you're probably going to want to throw the ball more. So, just for added reference, in games this year versus teams with a winning record and on the road, he is 1-4. He played the Cowboys, and then he played, which was the one win, and he played against a bunch of other teams, which were all losses. In those types of games this season, Tua averaged 23 completions and 35.2 pass attempts. So this is what happens when he's playing like actual competition, and he's not just wheeling and dealing over nobody teams. Prizepicks at the moment has his line set at 21 completions, 32.5 attempts, and 64.3% completion rate. Yeah. So, what I think personally is the Dolphins are going to struggle in this game. They're not going to take an early lead. This history, this track record of cold weather games does not bode well for them. So, playing from behind, I think Tua's going to throw it more. He already averages 35 passing attempts against sufficient competition, and I think it could be even more than that. So I would take the over on his pass attempts in this game. Along with that, while playing from behind, you have more desperation type of throws, and maybe he's not the most accurate when it's in cold weather because his numbers do drop to 57% completion. That's a 7% below what is being offered. So I would also take the under on Tua's completion percentage. Another thing that we know is that Mahomes has a very good record in cold weather games. He has not faced nearly as much as Tua. And though the Dolphins do a good job of limiting quarterbacks, the Dolphins defense ranks number 21 in catches allowed against opposing tight ends, or towards catches allowed to opposing tight ends, and number 16 in receiving yards allowed. Why does this matter? Because the Kansas City Chiefs have Travis Kelce on their team, who is a phenomenal playoff performer. He is the number 1 weapon for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he leads, I think, NFL history in the most catches in the postseason. So that's pretty significant. Now, right now, Prizepicks has his line set at 58.5 yards, and his receptions line at 5.5 receptions. I think that these are kind of insultingly low. Travis Kelce is a hell of a performer. He hasn't had the best of seasons by his standard this year, but that doesn't negate his playoff success. This is playoff football that we're talking about. You're going to want the ball in a trusted receiver's hand, and he has a huge history of succeeding in the playoffs. Just for added measure, Travis Kelce in games with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback in the playoffs, he averages 89.6 yards per game. And on top of that, the 58.5 yards that they have him set at, he has hit that number in 9 of his 9 last playoff games. Going back these 9 last playoff games, he has covered that amount. Then, taking a look at his 5.5 receptions, Travis Kelce averages 7.9 catches a game in the playoffs with Mahomes at quarterback, and he has covered his 5.5-point line in 9 of his last 10 playoff outings. So I think that both of these are pretty good value. Personally, I like the yardage more than I like the catches, just because the margin is much bigger. 89.6 is significantly more than 58.5, and he's covered it in each of his last 9 games. So I think that's a good history. I think this is a player that we can trust, and I personally like this one quite a bit. Then moving into the next game, which is the Steelers versus the Bills matchup. The first player that I want to recommend to you is Josh Allen. And this is because the Steelers defense ranks number 23 in passing yards allowed to opposing quarterbacks this season. Now, on the other hand, Josh Allen has played a handful of playoff games, so we know what he's like. He's actually pretty darn good in the playoffs. He hasn't been able to take his team to a Super Bowl, but that doesn't mean he hasn't had brilliant performances. So, Josh Allen so far in his career has averaged 292 passing yards a game and 52 yards rushing. That comes out to a total of 344 yards per game, passing and rushing. Now, this is pretty good, but he hasn't had the most steady of seasons this year. And so this line that he's being given is at a huge discount. Right now, actually, it's dropped even lower, but since coming up with these numbers, Prizepicks had his line at 214.5 passing yards, which is ridiculously low. He averages 292 yards a game, and it's being offered at 214.5. On top of that, his passing plus rushing yards combined for this game is being offered at 258.5 yards, which is, he covers this in I think all games except one in his playoff career. He has covered that with just passing, so you don't even need to tap into his rushing yards. With just passing the ball, Josh Allen is able to usually cover 258.5, so I think that is great value. Now, on top of that, another thing that I found is Josh Allen has completed 21 or more completions in every single one of his playoff games. But Prizepicks is currently offering his completions on the game at just 19. I think that's also great value. He has literally never had less than 21 completions in a game. I don't know if the Steelers would be the first one, considering they're number 23 in passing yards allowed. So I think that he can sling it around and get it done to get to 20. Just 20. All he needs is 20 completions, and he would cover that line. That one, when I was trying to place my bet, it did get taken off the board, which means they might think it's too good of a value, but I'm hoping that they will put it back on the board. We'll have to see. But yeah, after that, on the Steelers side of things, the next person that I would recommend to you is Jaylen Warren. See, Buffalo's defense ranks number 29 in the league this year in receiving yards allowed to opposing running backs, and they're ranked number 24 in receptions allowed to opposing running backs. Now, Jaylen Warren is more of the pass-catching back for the Steelers' backfield. Obviously, you have Najee Harris, who is a talented running back, but Jaylen Warren has been splitting quite a bit of snaps with Najee this year, and he does participate more in the receiving game. Now, taking a look at his last couple games, Jaylen Warren is with Mason Rudolph taking over for the Steelers at quarterback. Mason Rudolph has played in 3 games. In those 3 games, Jaylen Warren has 15 targets and 14 catches. But right now, his line is set at 3 receptions on Prizepicks and at 19.5 receiving yards. I feel like he most likely will get 5 looks, 5 targets. Let's say that he is getting that kind of volume, especially against a softer Buffalo defense who is not good at covering this and allows a lot of receptions and yardage to opposing running backs. Maybe it's even more, but even if he doesn't catch 5, if he catches 4, I think that's plenty enough to cover this 3. He has covered this 3 in all. He has covered 3 receptions in all of his last 5 games, and he's averaging 25.4 receiving yards in his last 5 games compared to the 19.5 that he is being given right now. Personally, I like the receptions a little more. I think 3 is very doable. He will cover that easily. So I would personally go with Jaylen Warren over 3 receptions. Then moving forward, you have the Packers versus the Cowboys game. I am fading this game. Fading means not betting on it at all. There are a couple positional advantages, but both teams are pretty all around good towards the other team. And maybe where they are lacking in their defensive capabilities, the other team isn't really able to capitalize. Like, for example, the Packers defense ranks number 30 in rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. So that means if you have a mobile, agile quarterback, they would be able to run up on this Packers defense. However, Dak Prescott this year has not been running on other teams' defenses with consistency, so I wouldn't really recommend that as a play. Just a couple weeks ago, he played against the Lions, and they were number 32 in that ranking, but he got like 2 yards on them, so it's a little too iffy. There's nothing very solid in this game that I could see with my 2 eyes, so I am fading it. After that, you move into the Rams and Lions football game. There's a couple people in this game that I think are good plays. Number 1 would be Matthew Stafford. The Lions defense ranks number 25 in passing yards allowed this season, and they rank number 27 in passing touchdowns allowed, and number 28 in 20 or more yard passes allowed. Matthew Stafford, he has capitalized on his last few outings. In his last 6 games, he has had over 18 fantasy points, and he has had over 18 fantasy points in his last 3 playoff games. Right now, Matthew Stafford's Prizepicks line is 18 fantasy points or more. And I think that he would be able to cover it. 5 out of his last 6 since returning from injury. His last 3 playoff games, he's been able to do it. I feel like he's going to have a chip on his shoulder playing against this old team in Detroit. I think that this would be a good play. But if you're worried about the prospect of maybe someone else devouring the touchdowns or Matthew Stafford not having enough passing touchdowns to get to that 18-point mark, you can also opt for Matthew Stafford passing yards. I think he's set at like 270 something, and he has cleared that in basically all of his last 5 games. He is averaging more by quite a bit, so that's also a safe play if you don't like the fantasy points. Moving forward, I would also like to recommend Puka Nacua. The Lions defense this year ranks number 26 in receiving yards allowed to opposing wide receiver, number 29 in receiving, in receptions allowed. Something's not right here. Number 29 in receiving touchdowns allowed, I think is what it's supposed to say. And then, number 27 in receptions over 20 yards to opposing wide receivers. Now, the Rams have 2 very gifted wide receivers that play for them. You have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. But taking a look at who has spliced up the Lions defense, I do think that they suffer more at trying to cover the slot, which really both of these guys can play. But let's take into account Puka Nacua's historic year. He just made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, and he set the NFL record for most catches and most receiving yards as a rookie wide receiver. So I am rolling with the guy who has been productive all year. Cooper Kupp has been dealing with some injuries, and he's been a little less consistent. Puka has been pretty sure shot. Puka Nacua's receiving yard line in this game is set at 76.5 yards. This year, he averaged 6 catches and 87.4 yards a game. And, this Lions defense is pretty soft. They allow a lot of opposing wide receivers to go off. You saw how CeeDee Lamb ran all over them in that game. And yeah, that was a pretty important matchup for them. So if they couldn't stop him, I don't think that they'll be able to stop Puka, especially with the number 2 receiver being Cooper Kupp. They just won't be able to give that much attention to Puka. And Matthew Stafford, I think, will be targeting him a lot in this game. So I would take the over on Puka Nacua's 76.5 receiving yards. After that, the next guy that I'm recommending to you is Sam Laporta, the tight end for the Detroit Lions. This year, the Rams' defense ranks number 29 in receiving yards allowed to opposing tight ends, number 30 in receiving touchdowns allowed to opposing tight ends, and number 30 in 20-plus yard receptions allowed, and number 29 in 40-plus yard receptions allowed. So they're not good at covering tight ends in short. The Rams struggle with this. On the other hand, you have the Lions, who had a very, very productive rookie tight end in Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta, not even as a rookie, but just as a tight end in the NFL. He was ranked top 5 in targets this year, receptions, receiving yards, target share. And yeah, so he is going to do very well against this Rams defense, who was not good at covering them. He gets a lot of targets. He gets a good target share. I think Jared Goff will be able to find him pretty easily in this game. So whatever is out there for Sam Laporta, I would probably take the over. So far, Prizepicks has not posted any squares for him except for a touchdown prop. Touchdown props are very iffy, It's harder to predict if someone is going to score or not than just yardage. So at your own risk, you can play it. But if any catch props or receiving yard props go up, I would take the over for Sam Laporta. Then lastly, we move into the last Wildcard Weekend game, which is on Monday. It is a showdown between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In this game, I really only have one person that I'm recommending, and this is because there's a lot of actually positional advantages. Both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense and the Eagles defense are not very good, statistically speaking. The Eagles defense ranks number 28 in passing yards allowed, number 31 in passing touchdowns allowed to opposing quarterbacks, and the Bucs defense ranks number 32 in passing yards allowed and number 31 in passes of over 20 yards allowed to opposing quarterbacks. So both defenses are pretty soft in the passing game. But Jalen Hurts has hurt his finger, and he hasn't thrown a football since last Sunday, so I realistically cannot trust him to do anything. I don't trust anyone on the Eagles' offense for that reason. I don't know what the game script is going to look like at all based on his injury. I don't even know if he's going to suit up for this game, so I'm fading everyone on the Eagles' offense. The Buccaneers, on the other hand, Baker has had back-to-back lousy weeks. If he was rolling the way he was in December, I would have easily picked some things. But I don't really have that faith in Baker like that, and his playoff resume is very short, so I can't really draw on his experience. But another area where the Eagles defense struggles is in the wide receiver covering area. The Eagles defense ranks number 30 in receiving yards allowed this season to opposing wide receivers. They rank number 32 in receiving touchdowns given up, and they rank number 32 in receptions allowed to opposing wide receivers. So this is where you enter Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is averaging 83.6 yards per game in his last 5 games, but his line on Prizepicks is set to only 55.5 yards. Obviously, you have two very talented wide receivers playing and suiting up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And realistically, I think that either is a good play. I think that based on what I've seen, the Eagles defense struggles more at the outside wide receiver, the perimeter wide receiver, which would be Mike Evans. But Mike Evans' line is set much higher, and he's been playing a little less consistently. He hasn't hit it as much, whereas Chris Godwin in his last 5 games has been productive. He has hit this line pretty easily, and I think the matchup suits him well. So I would take the over 55.5 receiving yards for Chris Godwin. And yeah, that concludes all of my recommendations for Prizepicks this upcoming weekend. Feel free to mix and match these props however you see fit. Whatever's available, whatever gets discounted, just throw them together and put some money on it if you'd like. And once again, if you happen to catch this video on Friday before midnight, you are eligible to place a Flex Friday promotional pick, and any flex play that you play up to $20, as long as you remember to opt in, will get refunded back to you in full if it doesn't hit. So that's $20 you can play around